Hi there, Randy Green here. Let us talk about Principle 1, which for your convenience and if you want to study further, I have also made the New Grand Cycle Transition course 1 and 2. That's part of the whole basics, as well as woven the principles into the whole transition science classes. So on the highest level, it has been covered, but here we want to take it down a notch. And in the previous videos, we have established, or I have established, that my point of principles, the principles and the understanding of the principles is not talking ethics or moral or any forms of religious foundational concepts, which is the typical one where we begin to talk about, okay, how do we behave, but more kind of going into what we would call a psychic energetic approach to the principles and how we can integrate them as part of our life as a kind of what we would call a guideline of behavior and a guideline of how to be around self, others, and our reality. And when I talk about self, it's also a way to behave around ourselves, that is, to our body, to the fields, to who and what we are, and how we perceive ourselves, and what the narratives are in our heads, so to speak, because there are many different levels when we talk about the inner human and our personality matrix. And these are some of the things that humanity as a whole, both within psychology and all of the different branches of psychology, are investigating. Okay, what are we? How do we work and how we put together? And we're also seeing it going into neurobiology, which is also becoming part of psychology, because we are understanding more and more that what we see as our psychological makeup is both nurture and nature. So we are basically, we have inherited specific traits from our parents, as well as what is hidden within what we call the human DNA. And that's an even deeper level, going far into the past lives and all the things that we have been. And that's what I want to investigate, aside from contemporary sciences and contemporary psychology, which has many, many good tools, taking all of these and then add more to it, because we are more than what just meets the eye. And the psyche and the personality matrix is much more complicated than what most people understand right now. There are many ways to work with what we call the psychic energetic level of who and what we are. And I began as a psychotherapist, again, these different levels I'm working on, because the whole existential questions began as a child, and my understanding of existentiality, including the mysticism that I had access to as a child, and past life memories, which granted me an insight into life. Not that my brain at that time were completely capable of understanding it. I got the glimpses. I thought it was dreams. I tried to explain it in normal ways, but couldn't really. So that opened up this kind of investigative mind to figure out, okay, what is it? I can't find it out there. And remember, when I was a kid, I only had the library, right? We didn't have the internet and all these fancy things. So it was this big, big question mark. What is life? What is human? Why do I exist? Why does other exist? Why do people do what they do? And all of these questions I asked myself, which made me quite not introvert in that manner, but I was more focused in the whole inner level of reality, so to speak, than the outer levels. And I observed the outer levels and tried to understand them more than actively feeling the need to participate in it, as if I'd already been there, done that. Now I want to understand why and what this life is and what this matters and why the body is, and all of these questions that I had as a child, including the most prominent one is, why do people behave as they behave? And is there a God? And is there life before and after? And looking up into the sky. And as a child, remember looking at the stars and knowing there's more out there. It's not just this. And why am I in this cocoon? And why are there not this and that? And I couldn't express it. This was just something I knew. And then we all get swallowed up by the hormones and the teenage issues, and then fall in love and all the things that we are occupied with in our teens into our mid-20s. And there at the age of 22, I began my journey again due to a series of dreams and life circumstances that pushed me in a different direction. I had fallen in love with a guy who went to Yugoslavia to participate in the wars there, and that was an odd experience for me, because it was kind of pushing me out of my ordinary mindset and into a different type of mindset of being this war, not a widow because he didn't die, but the one that was left behind, a soldier's wife, so to speak. And that was a different mindset than I had. It opened up to older levels of what we call psychological behavior and psychological understanding that were not had not been in my mind as a 20-year-old or at that time. So actually I was 24, but it began when I was 22, but that mindset opened up there. So that's again, when we come into this life crisis, that puts us in between spaces, as I like to call it, where we are not in our comfort zone, and we are not lodged into the comfort zone, but we're put out on what we call the burning ground, where things gets shaky, and there are what we are accustomed to suddenly does not apply anymore. The narrative falls apart, and we have to redefine ourselves and who and what we are and what we want to achieve in life. And the whole question mark, I'd begun in education, which at that point suddenly seemed pointless. And then I shifted it into another one where I actually was going to do cross studies of religion, but that suddenly also felt pointless. And then I began my own studies and tried to find the answers. I went into mysticism because I felt with this whole life and death scenario suddenly becoming part of my life, having someone I loved being part of a war, which is Denmark has not been in war since 1945, right? So that was different, to put it that way. So, but this, you only say, well, what does that have to do with principle one? Because when we talk about principle one, that is only behave as we want others to behave. And you know, the saying is, it's part of the Gospels as well, but this is the rewriting of it in a way. So it doesn't become religious, and it has lost its original, understanding of the Gospels of Christianity, but it's part of all wisdom literature. So there's really not much to it. We find it everywhere because, as you know, I've studied quite a lot of the ancient text and all sorts of religions and all sorts of mysticism, Jewish mysticism, Christian mysticism, the Kabbalistic tree, the crossings between these Kala Chakra, the esoteric teachings, the theosophical teachings, you name it. I've been all over the place to find the answers, and just to kind of say, yeah, that's all good and fine, but these are ancient cultures and they don't really apply to us anymore because we're different. We're in a different place. We live in a different way. We have different type of technology. Psychologically speaking, to a large degree, still the same, which we can see if you read the Enuma Elish, which the Gilgamesh epoch, an old Syrian. It's actually 2500 BC. I think they dated it to that. You'll see, yeah, kind of the same story that's going on today, right? So psychologically speaking, we have not advanced much yet. So that is also what I wanted to tap into as I investigated further. I kind of came up with so long time has gone, so long time has passed, and we're still psychologically speaking not developed further. And that's also part of the inquiry that set me into creating a higher awareness lifestyle, because only behave as we want others to behave. And I behave in a way as a role model, like I want others to behave, not just in terms of psychological inclusiveness and openness and a curiosity about other people that allows us to ask questions and hear what they say and see who they are. but also go into this whole higher level of understanding. I would love other people to also have studied the higher order sciences and understood these. Can you imagine where we would be if people had all studied the higher order sciences and had the complete full picture of their ancient history and their past, present, and future, and were able to work on the timelines as well as working on, psychologically speaking, in this current life to undo the effects of the past, to get rid of the karmic imprints and the clutter and all the things that are no longer of use, and then update their abilities to be able to progress and develop our society and our world into the highest potentials that it can carry. Can you imagine how that would be? So that's technically also part of principle 1. Because if, as you know, Gandhi said that be the change you want to see in the world, right? So he has already put it in there. As I said, there's absolutely nothing new here. There's always been these wise people that have had access to the inner realms, and they have always said more or less the same. So what does it take to get what we could call a larger portion of humanity to grasp these concepts and actively work with them? And you can say, well, Randy, it's already happening, and there's this whole awakening process out there, and activation and ascension. And yes, we are definitely moving in what we could call a more expanded direction of consciousness. But again, I ask the questions, is that the right direction? And this is again where I just have to be the opposition all the time, right? It's like whenever I try to get into something, it's like I just don't fit there. The key doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. It kind of only fits when I'm on my own investigation and going into all of these mystic realms that I have access to and have all of these weird visions and things are going on, and that's not something I technically can take out and have amongst others, so to speak. That's something that's mine and mine alone, because it's part of my energy structure and what is embedded into my energy system, so that when I walk the path of activation, that these visions and series of experiences will adapt my energy system. Sorry about that. Adapt my energy system into being able to unfold its content, and also to fill out the blanks. Because this is some of the things I was working with yesterday, thinking about, okay, what's going on here? The whole kind of, we are having these DNA sequences that are not complete. They are having blanks. It has been said junk DNA. I don't really agree on that one. But again, we are just splitting hairs over terminology here, but it all comes down to the different chromosomes that we need to activate. We have the 3rd cycle chromosome, which is the Y chromosome, that is goes with spatial features. We have the X chromosome, that's the 4th cycle chromosome, that goes with the ability to administer timelines and vibrational fields, and that's all connected to our heart field. So the Y chromosome is technically just connected to the physical form and the ability to exist in space. And then you have the 5th chromosome, which we should develop ourselves into, that is connected to the 5th cycle, where humanity should be at this what do you call it, state in time, let me just call it that way, point in time. That's the word I was looking for. That's where we should be now, humanity. But we're just the XY in the females, and is it the YY? I can't remember. In males, or are they XY as well? I can't remember. Suddenly, wow, that just slipped my mind. No, they're XY and females are XX, right? I just suddenly just slipped my mind completely, because that's not where I'm supposed to go. This is so interesting how my brain works. Whenever I'm getting down, when I'm getting sidetracked from what I want to talk about, it's like, yeah, no, there's a door there, and then the information just fizzles out and ceases to exist. Whereas I've talked about these things in the whole perception logs, they're as clear as day, but that's because I already worked with it, and I just kind of, yeah, that's the foundation now, and I'm just continue working. So in this only behave as we want others to behave is also about progression. It's also, if we want to set forth an example of being a role model of a human that is progressing, well, then we have to walk the talk. We have to be what we want others to be. So that's the first step. That is to look inside and say, okay, who am I? What am I? What type of human do I want to be? What is my narrative? What is my personal story? What's my life story? What kind of personality matrix do I want? What do I want to see in others? And to get that, due to the law of reciprocity, we have to generate in ourselves first. So that is what is hidden in principle one, is that little secret that if we are dissatisfied with the world around us and people around us and everything, we are talking in psychology, we talk about projection. That you kind of, all of your subconscious material, that's Carl Gustav Jung, all your subconscious material you are projecting into other people, and all of these weird dynamics, so that you can get engaged in this subconscious dynamic where you are technically forcing other people to play out what you have not seen in yourself yet. Remember from the Gospels, why do you see other people's faults but you're not seeing your own, right? So that goes with that understanding. We're doing that, absolutely, no doubt about it. All the things that we have not really nailed yet, that we're still insecure about, we have a tendency to attract people that will force that up to the surface, show our weaknesses, show where this is something that is in you that you haven't really nailed yet, and you're still on this should I not, or in doubt, or whatever process, in between chair processes. And then we have people coming our way, pushing us either to one of the other chairs, forcing us to take a stand and say, no, that's where my power is. That's where I am aligned with my core self, because this is all about, when we really talk about progression dynamics, as we know from the Buddhist teachings as well, it's about not being in the oppositions, but getting into the balance point where we get aligned. So that is the balance point of the biofield, the emotional field, the mental field. That's the three lower fields that needs to be cleared out to their highest potentials, from where they can align with the deeper energy system. And then that has to be cleared out through the timeline work and the past lives and what have you. So that gets a balance point as well. And then we can reach the consciousness potentials that we have hidden in our upper template. Those of us who have one left, and those who haven't, well, there are still at the highest level of our higher order energy system, there are still what we could call consciousness potentials left. Otherwise, we technically wouldn't be able to. I'm not going to say exist, because there are humans out there that only have the three lower fields. So it's not a given that everybody has a higher order energy system. But those of us who are from the old groups of humans and humanoids, we have our version of what we call a higher order energy system. But it's all come down to that alignment, because you remember from the Buddhist saying is that the Buddha was sitting under the Bodhi tree, which is Bodhi technically means enlightened, right? So he was sitting under the enlightenment tree, which is interesting. He was sitting under that, and there he achieved that alignment where he got his he achieved the alignment that led to his enlightenment. Very nicely put in difficult words there. But that is a complete center point where all of the fields are aligned and then are pushed into their highest purity rate, their highest standards, and their highest progression rate. There you get that slam, as if you were hit by lightning, and then you activate completely on all levels of your existence. And that is, in many ways, if we really get to the highest levels and get to what is stored up in the library of our original energy system, and our we have these different discs that are part of the library as well as the book of life, then we can technically do what's called the transfiguration and cease to exist completely inside this reality. And we're done completely and we get pulled out. I talk about these things in the whole transition science classes as well. So I won't go further into that. But here we can say that principle one leads to our higher self-responsibility. And it does that both energetically as well as mentally and emotionally, along with what we call the deeper observances in speech, behavior, and emotional response to all which are put in front of us. So that sounds a little bit complicated, but the higher order observance in speech, behavior, and emotional response are also part of mindfulness. And we have talked about that both in Buddhism, and there are many, many people out there talking about mindfulness and in all different ways and forms. And I think it's a good thing that's being integrated into psychology as well, because it both goes with mindfulness, both goes with what we call the observance and the curiosity and the ability to contain and be in whatever's happening without getting completely immersed into it, but are learning to observe it and work with it in the right way, so to speak, that is right for us, so we can transform it or let go of it and just turn the other cheek, as it's said, but not being, not identifying ourselves with it, but literally just saying this is just another process of our body. Similarly, as when you're pooping, you're not identifying yourself with the poop, right? It's a process of your body. And the same goes with the psychological processes. That's the next step that we need to get to, because that will lead to a higher type of mental capacity where the brain really kicks off and not just lodged into the limbic system and electrochemical processes, but begin to take in play the frontal lobe capacities that we technically have, and meditation is part of that, to shift out of the limbic system and into the frontal lobe system. So it's also coming into the whole behavior and emotional response, so that if we're not completely tangled and webbed into our emotional responses, we can change our behavior accordingly, because we have that. We are not just reacting. We are having that moment, that split second, where we actually have a choice of how do I behave here? And because we are so accustomed to the meditation and the inner work and the observances of our emotions and what we are and our chemical reactions, we know right there, yeah, that reaction, that's that emotion, that reaction, that's that emotion. And here I have visualized and meditated and done energy work and experienced it so many times that I know I'm not going to take that response to that energy. I'm taking a step back, observing the fluctuations and the interference and what's going on. And then I choose a behavior that is suitable for that call to action electrochemical response that I'm having. And sometimes if we are up against some pretty strong forces in another person, we're not always strong enough to withstand that impulse that comes from others, because that has something to do with their configuration and their energy system. And in that, we of course become a little bit like leaves in the wind that are just being blown here and there and don't really know where to go. But that's also part of our strengthening and our empowerment in the mindfulness and in the observances, that we learn to be that calm human that can have a lot of emotional reactions, but are not necessarily responding to all of them. So this is also about what is the right approach here, what will balance the situation, what will escalate the situation, what would be the most fruitful outcome, most optimal outcome for all involved in this situation. So that are also part of only behave as we want others to behave. So there's a lot of responsibility in this. We have to have quite a lot of abilities to observe and respond in a way that we can feel content with. And you would say, that's very theoretical. Actually, it's not, because those of you who know me, you know that I'm a mom. I'm grateful for having a full-blown young woman now, so I'm no longer little children's mom, but I've got a grown-up I'm mentoring to fulfill her life and become the highest functional human being that she can be capable of, which is a long-term joy for me to see how she develops and unfolds all of her potentials. But it's also time-consuming, and it takes a long time to become a functional human being inside this world with all of these challenges. But going back to this, being a parent is probably one of the best learning processes of what behavior not to continue, because you have a deep responsibility for another living being. And if you mess that one up, then that other person is messed up for lifetime, right? So you have a really strong responsibility to your children. And in that, I recall first, I drew on what I learned from my parents and just come to realization that did not work very well, because I was too different from my parents, and there was not much that they technically had taught me or been around me. On the opposite, I probably got more, what do you call it? Interaction if I had grown up amongst wolves, right? So I grew up with my cats, and they were technically, most of the teachers were my cats that gave me what my parents couldn't do, because at that time they were all over the place with everything else in their lives and really had not much time for a kid anymore. So anyways, we'll just leave it there. So there was not much for me to use there. The skeleton was not there, so I had to invent everything from scratch, which I think is both good and bad, so to speak. It's good because there I could think about everything, what would be the right approach to this, and it's bad because I had to invent everything. So it was quite a big responsibility, and at the same time also enormously time and energy consuming, because I had to figure everything out. Every little thing had to be twisted and turned, is the right way or not right way, what are the effects of it, and what are the long-term effects of this, and should I do that, and all of these kind of things. So it's not a simple task when you have to kind of start from scratch and not have the ancestral knowledge to draw from, so to speak. Well, technically I just drew on different ancestral knowledge than what was within what we call contemporary humanity, right? So anyway, so if I had some kind of response to what my daughter did when she was younger, they have different phases as their brains develops, and that is, they can also act out and do all sorts of stuff. And if I responded in a way that I afterwards did not agree with, in that manner, that I looked at my behavior, I looked at what I'd done, and I didn't like the energy of it. I just didn't like it. So there I would sit in meditation and evaluation and look into, okay, how will I respond next time? Because this does not make me feel good. I feel bad about that response. Not that I was overly aggressive or anything. It was just that the way I behaved, I could see some of my dad and some of the things he did. He was one of these very yelling, scolding, short-tempered personalities, right? And my mom was the emotional whatever. So anyway, so I could just see that either of their reactional patterns were not suitable for this situation that was in. So that was the trial and error parenting that I technically had to do. But fortunately, I quickly adjusted, because I kind of knew that, yeah, you can do it once, then it won't have a greater harm effect. But if you continue the pattern, then it will become part of her personality structure. So therefore, I changed that. So that's also a way to look at yourself amongst other people. We could just say with other adults, it doesn't have to be the kid, but there it's really important. Whereas when we're around other grown-up people, we have a tendency to kind of self-justify. Yeah, it's probably whatever. And then we have a talk, and then the other person often understands it. Or if it's completely different personality structure, absolutely does not. Anyways, we have a little bit of a tendency to not take it so seriously as with a kid. At least that's my take on it, because with a kid, you have this very sensitive little being that's supposed that relies on you, and that's supposed to go out in the world and become a functional human. Whereas with adults, that's not your responsibility in that manner. They are kids of someone else, and they are living their own lives, and that's a different type of communication and there are much more details with that's not just kind of, yeah, that's how it is. As always, we can unfold everything into many more details. So of course we behave amongst other adults as we would like them to behave to us. But at the same time, we're also doing the introspection, where we really look at our behavior and then we self-adjust. If we can see that behavior is not likable in a manner, it's harmful. And when I say likable, I not mean what other people like and don't like, because we can't control that, but we can control what we like ourselves. What do we feel works for us? Is this a response that we feel imbalanced with? Is this a response that makes us feel aligned with ourselves and our core values? So we also have to have an idea of what are our core values, who are we as a person. So that's the introspection that comes with that as well. And it would be nice if other people would do the same introspection and self-adjustment and all of these things. That would make it so much easier when we kind of go a little bit off track amongst each other and are not behaving as we're supposed to in that manner. that leads to the least amount of negative distortion energies, right? Where we can be the optimal version of ourselves and create a synergetic effect where whoever is part of that joint room of energy will prosper and grow from it, because that should be the optimal reason why we are interacting with other people, not to make them feel bad about themselves, but actually so we could amplify and assist each other in our growth processes. That would be awesome if humanity could get in that direction, because they are deeply involved in their own progression work and the mindfulness processes and self-observing processes and self-adjusting processes, and not self-justifying processes as most people do. But I can talk about that much more, and I am getting ready to, on the randygreen.one, creating a series of 10-step self-healing program, as well as a 10-step inner work program, where I will come up with a deeper investigation of these dynamics and go into all of the levels of the psychological work that we can do on our own. And that's, of course, based upon all of the types of work I have been doing with myself as well, because we don't teach others what we have not done ourselves as it is and figure out whether it works or not. We are the first example of whatever we are trying to show the world or envision or enact into the world. So principle 1 is also called the law of the one. That is, if one can do it, others can do it too. So we are way showers, all of us. At least if we work with energy, we are. So if you take that, you can take both sides of the polarity fence here. If you choose to do something, if you really engage in working with energy and you activate and you choose to do stuff that is in the darker polarity of things, you set that as an example. So that is also why we need to be mindful and really look into the choices that we make, because we have a large responsibility the moment we begin to work with the psychic energetic energies or side of things. We need to be responsible humans that know what we are doing, or at least learn as we go along and adjust and clear up our mess when we have made a big mess of things, because it is possible. It is the repetitive patterns that kind of makes the biggest challenges and the largest amounts of distortion in our reality field. So everything we do allow for others to do it as well. So we better sharpen up, right? That's part of the future of humanity as I see it. If we are to really fulfill these completion cycles as we're supposed to and get to the point of the highest purity rate, the high standards, and with that, the highest progression rate, if not in this cycle, then in the next. So with that little overview of principle 1 in its what we could call more mundane everyday life interpretation, I will hereby end this video. Thank you.